go, ma'am.
Hello and welcome to Street Stories. We have a very special guest today, Neerja Mattoo. She's taught generations of women at the Government Women's College in Srinagar. She's taught them English, but not just that. She's taught them a lot about life and a lot about Kashmir and Kashmiri. And that's exactly what we're going to speak about today. We're going to talk to her about her new book, which is about on the four women poets of Kashmir, Lal Ded, Habba Khatoon, Arnimal, and Rupa Bhavani. But we'll also take the discussion a bit beyond that and talk about the Kashmiri woman identity and also why she never left Kashmir. And I think that's quite a remarkable thing. As we all know, there's been an unfortunate divide in the valley between the Muslims and Hindus, something that she didn't grow up with, that my generation that my mother's generation didn't grow up with, but unfortunately has become a reality now, and we saw the exodus of a lot of Kashmiri Pandits from the valley as well. So, Professor Mattoo, hello, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
Yeah.
asking me. Thank you.
And yes, and let's begin the discussion with your new work of translation, which is quite extraordinary and tells us so much about these four poets who thought things that seem as relevant now as they were then. What is it about them that drew you to them, and that convinced you that their voices needed to be heard by a larger audience?
You see, many things actually have contributed to my desire to translate these women. First of all, you see, these are familiar names to all Kashmiris, except for Rupa Bhavani and Arnimal. Maybe
Yeah.
many people don't know, but Habba Khatoon and Lal Ded are very much a part of the ordinary vocabulary of Kashmiris.
Right.
They quote Lal Ded's works as proverbs, and they sing Habba Khatoon songs to the accompaniment of Tumbak Nari,
Right.
everything at all festive occasions. So these songs were there at the back of my mind. But only when later on, I did some translation from short stories, Kashmiri short stories into English. They were received well. And also, I was quite surprised at the European, response to some of these collections. A person from Geneva called me up and said, "These are great stories."
Hmm.
So I thought that I was doing something for Kashmir.
Yeah.
And this was actually, this serious translation work coincided with the turmoil in the valley towards the end of the 80s and the beginning of 90s. See, I was a teacher all my life. All my life, and from when I was 20, I started teaching and I continued to teach for nearly 4 decades. And at that time, suddenly it seemed that we were losing everything
Right.
Kashmiri that we treasured. First of all, much teaching was not happening. There were hartals and there were curfews and lockdowns we are familiar with now.
Right.
That kind of thing was happening, and much work couldn't be done. So I actually felt at that time that we were losing Kashmir and we lose everything, the cultural heritage, the richness, everything. And there was suddenly the appearance of a divide
Yeah.
between Pandits and Muslims, because the heroes of one community were the villains of another community,
Right.
that kind of thing. So I thought that, look, we have this huge, great tradition. It shouldn't be lost. Because you see, people sometimes get obsessed with the present.
Hmm.
But I feel that we should have a more greater sense of history. You should know that this is not the way things were. So I started this translation because it kept me occupied also, but also it sort of made me feel that I was doing something for Kashmir.
Hmm.
As I told you, when the short stories were appreciated, I thought that there is something worth translating. And
Right.
I didn't have the courage really to translate poetry. But a happy thing happened towards the end of the 90s. Somebody told me that the Ministry of Human Resource Development, their cultural wing, is giving senior fellowships to for projects. So I thought this is probably a divine intervention that let me. I just made a proposal about these four women
Right.
because I was familiar with all four of them because Rambhavani belongs to the clan to which my family also belonged.
Yeah, you're a Dhar, right? Originally.
I was Neerja Dhar
Yeah,
before I became Neerja Mattoo.
yeah.
And Rambhavani was very much a part of our religious as well as cultural kind of heritage. And we used to go to her shrines in Safakadal, Vaskur, Manigam, Lar, Chashma Sahibi, all these places you were associated with. So I was curious. I said, let me see what kind of poetry she writes because
Mm.
there were her things were recorded. That was the one thing which kept her, made her different from the other three, that they were recorded faithfully by her father's agency
Right.
because he welcomed her when she walked out of her marital home, and then they acknowledged her divinity. It is because of her sainthood that
Mm.
her these works were preserved. But when I looked at them, they seemed a daunting task because her vocabulary was quite different to Lal Ded's. But I sort of persisted. I sent the proposal. Fortunately, it was accepted. So that gave me a kind of an incentive to work a bit more serious. And then many interesting things happened when I was finding myself a little ignorant, not sure. Someone or the other would intervene, knowledgeable
Right.
person, and guide me. And I would
Mm.
like to mention
Right.
these few things here who encouraged me to do this. One was this Prabha Devi of Swami Lakshmanju's ashram in Nishat. It
Right.
was just a chance. By chance, I happened to meet her, and I was absolutely stunned at the level of scholarship she had about Kashmir Shaivism. And she was gracious enough to explain many things to me. Because you see, I had been teaching English literature, and in my family, we didn't have that religious kind of a
Mm.
training or that kind of thing happening. My father was a very modern, forward looking gentleman, more interested in reading literature rather than reading scripture.
Right.
So, but anyway, so I understood due to the intervention of Prabha Devi ji, I began to understand the depth of Kashmir Shaivism, which pervades Lal Ded's works all the time.
Right.
And this also helped me understand Rambhavani a little because she's in the same tradition. And she acknowledges Lal Ded as her first guru. And her first work actually pays tribute to Lal Ded and her father because he says the father was also like a guru. So then I got encouraged to continue with my work. And Habba Khatoon and Arnimal were comparatively easy because they were lyric poets and I was familiar with what happens in lyrical poetry. But what was very, very astonishing was that they were very bold voices.
Yeah.
They were not hiding the way they were.
Right.
Ah, yes, please, what were you saying?
No, with
I
Arnimal,
was saying that they were.
yeah, with Arnimal, her
Uh-huh.
description of domestic violence, it's so chilling.
Chilling, but also it is so bold of her to say this openly.
Yeah.
This scholar husband of hers, and even she in a way defamed him through her, you see, utterances,
Right.
talking about the way she was treated. And you see, the sad thing, or I should say, the remarkable thing of this Habkatun as well as Animal is that they are proud of their beauty. They are proud of the fact that they are better women than the kind of people this lover is consorting with.
Right.
And they sort of, in a way, are proud of their accomplishments also and everything. And then they make no secret of the way they have been treated. So I thought that was a kind of a feminism,
Yes.
proto-feminism, I would call it, even though they were not consciously feminists, but they were raising the woman's voice, exposing the cruelty, the exploitation of a feudal society, as well as the male, you see, dominance. They were doing this. So I somehow my task became easy because I really fell in love with their works and I enjoyed reading them and sort of toying with the idea of how I could put it into English. You see, the thing with me is that in my when I was growing up, these two languages were almost like, mother tongues, because my father was a professor and my two older brothers who were much older than me, they were also speaking English, but we were speaking Kashmiri mostly. So I had this little ability, I should say, to think simultaneously in the two languages. And to tell you the truth, it is the agency of these women that never made me look for a dictionary or anything. The words would come according to me appropriate, but I think they are liked by others also. So it wasn't really so much of an effort. I was not making a conscious effort. With
Right.
Rambhavani, certainly I had to make an effort. With Habba Khatoon and Arnimal, it was as if I was understanding their language very well, understanding the emotion and the passion and the sadness, the poignancy, and I was putting it into words for them to be heard by others. Actually, I must tell you that I grew up in a very, very special environment
Right.
because you see, we lived in this place called Exchange Road. It was a small
Yeah.
kind of a mohalla, mostly Kashmiri Pandits, but all of them
I'm
were
familiar with
educated.
that. I'm yeah. I'm familiar with that, ma'am. I that was my mother's home.
My mother came from the same neighborhood.
Exactly.
And you see, the nice thing about the neighborhood was that it had everybody was getting educated,
Right.
and these were professional people who were living there. There were no business people, no kind of moneyed people. They were all middle class,
Mm.
but they had aspirations towards modernity. They were educating their children, and the remarkable thing was they were educating their daughters also. The family to which your mother belonged, how many daughters they had?
Of course, my mother has
Do
six
you know?
sisters.
7
Yeah.
in all.
Yeah.
You
In
are
all.
not as well informed.
Yeah.
I could name them all.
Yeah.
And this neighborhood was like one huge family. We used to be running in and out of one another's houses. And also, the interesting thing was there were more girls in that neighborhood
Right.
than boys. I don't remember, except for 2 or 3 boys, the rest were all girls. And it was like a community of women exchanging ideas with each other. We were not fashionable people, but we were confident people.
Yeah.
So that also has given me some kind of a, let's say, backbone.
Right.
I don't know.
That's
So
very,
that's how
yeah,
the rest.
that's very interesting, Neerja ji, that you mentioned this idea of confidence, because that is something that women have always struggled with. You know, the idea that even the poets that you refer to, the idea of self confidence, the idea of self respect, that's something that women have always, now we're told, oh, you have to lean in, you have to, struggle with, you have to beat the imposter syndrome. These women didn't have any of that. They're so remarkably confident.
Most interesting part of it all, they were much more, what should I say, liberated and
Yeah,
modern, much more under pressure, much less under pressure than the generation today. When I see
exactly.
the generation of Kashmiri women today, I feel so bad because they haven't known that freedom. They haven't known that kind of self confidence. They are feeling crushed between all kinds of forces. And you can say they're being pushed back to medievalism. But our generation grew up with this sky being the limit. We thought that anything could be done. I'll tell you, the girls from our neighborhood, some of them became doctors, some of them became educators. One of them was the principal of a college later on. And all kinds of, accomplishments they had. All the girls from my little older women, also older than me, they also became professionals. But today,
So
I
what happened? What happened? Was it the displacement, or was it something far deeper?
No, actually, what happened in 90s was uh, actually a complete, what should I say, a distortion of everything we had believed in. You
Hmm.
see, first of all, the schism between Pandits and Muslims
Right.
did not exist in my time at all. We were like, you see, our closest neighbor were a family who had rented that house. That was a government house, and they had come to live there. This was actually a leading physician of that time. You may have heard his name, Dr. Ali Jan.
Yeah, of course.
You must have heard the name.
Yeah.
So they were there, and we were like one family. You see, they lived at the back of our house, and we only had a wooden fence. So some planks from the wooden fence were removed so that we could come and go from the back door. back.
Right.
And their children were like us. Their mother was the most affectionate lady. But I must tell you that my mother became her closest friend. But
Right.
she would not eat cooked food in that house.
Yeah.
And that lady was a very understanding woman. My mother went into the house, she would call the servant and say, "Look, bring some fruit for her because she won't have tea."
Right.
This was accepted. But
Yeah.
yet they were so close to each other. They shared the deepest secrets with each other. They wept together, they laughed together. And the person who made the most of our good results was Ali Jan's wife, Boba, we used to call her. She used to come with her large platter of almonds and goodies and shower it on us, which our family never made much fuss of our results. But she would take pride in our accomplishments. And her daughters also grew up very well educated. One of them is a leading doctor in America. The other didn't work, but is also a fine, accomplished young woman. Not so young anymore, but we are still very close to the family and everything. But in 90, this whole thing was disrupted
Right.
because the Kashmiri Pandits left, and we were not even aware that they were leaving.
Yeah.
Because I have heard stories of how one brother left without informing his other brother that he was leaving. There was terror, fear, because nothing like that had happened before. So this selective killing of Kashmiri Pandits had chilled them all, and whoever had young children studying thought it best to leave because they thought that this was a blighted place now. There would be no education, nothing. So they didn't only save their lives, but they saved the future of their children.
Right.
Because for a Kashmiri Pandit, you should know the most important thing is education.
Education.
Education is their goal.
Yeah.
Professional education is something which they know is
Right.
the way to go now.
Yeah.
And when they left this place, fortunately for them, they suffered a lot, but their children got educated. Excuse me, 1 minute.
Yeah.
But then, you see, they suffered tremendously. But why didn't we leave? We didn't leave
Hmm.
because we lived in a neighborhood which had always been a Muslim, predominantly Muslim neighborhood. And we had had excellent relations with them. So there was no question of thinking of them as the other.
Right.
They accepted us, we accepted them. So in as far as our neighborhood was concerned, there was no schism. And also when almost you see my husband was attacked in a sense that he was almost kidnapped. But the
Right.
person who saved him was our driver, who was a Muslim.
Right.
He's the one who told those armed young men, "Look, listen to me for a second, and then you can do what you like."
Hmm.
As soon as they turned their back, my husband ran.
Hmm.
And then this poor driver of ours had to go underground because he had been accused of, you see, having betrayed the cause by not letting the militants abduct my husband. But he preferred to do that. He never lost his respect and affection for us. After many months, when things became a little safer for him, he would continue to work for us and everything. So, and our neighbors were so cooperative at that time because when they heard of this attempt, they also felt very embarrassed as well, almost ashamed because you see, this was they thought was giving a bad name to the movement. So we thought that if we leave, we'll be letting them down also. And I must tell you, it was the first time in many years that people had not been afraid of showing solidarity to a victim of militancy
Right.
because the fear was such. But here was a case in which they did not, you see, distance themselves. They came and they said, "Please don't leave." We said, "There's no question of our leaving." So we stayed on. That's how we stayed on.
But you've seen the not just the politics of the state, but the language, the culture. You've seen it changing in front of you. I used to remember my father came from the city. He came from Habba Khatoon, and my mother, of course, grew up in Exchange Road. And my mother
Mm.
would always complain that my father's Kashmiri was very different and, much more colorful and full of proverbs. And she would say it's much tougher than the Kashmiri she grew up with. And now I was reading somewhere, Neerja, that you say that the Kashmiri now that is spoken in the valley and the Kashmiri that is now spoken outside, the difference is even wider. So, how,
Actually, you see, the vocabulary was sometimes different. There is no
right,
doubt about it, because you see, we would refer to our gods and our saints in
right,
Kashmiri Pandits, and they would refer to this. But at that time, this vocabulary was understandable for both, because they
right,
had Muslims as well as Hindus had heard these things being spoken of.
right,
These points of reference were familiar. But what is happening now is
yeah,
that it is becoming difficult for the two communities to really communicate, because the Kashmiri that is now spoken in the valley is become a little more Persianized, a little more with more Arabic words and references and different things. And the Kashmiri Pandits are also become a little more Sanskritized. I'm not talking about the normal common way day-to-day speech. I'm talking about the writings and other things. So that you see, I have a fear that Kashmiri might suffer the same fate
yeah,
as Hindi and Urdu, because originally the two were almost the same language.
right.
But then Urdu became a different language, Hindi became a different language. I'm afraid that if this continues, this divide continues, and there is no way they can communicate with each other on a common platform, there soon will be a Urdu Kashmiri or a Hindi Kashmiri. But
And how
otherwise, you see,
how sad is that? I mean, imagine one state and two different kinds of languages where people cannot even
yes,
understand.
it is very. No, no. You see, actually, I'm presenting an extreme case, but
Right.
this is bound to happen,
Yeah.
because you see, there is no common meeting ground. Because you see, originally when they were all located in the Kashmir Valley, they understood each other's, allusions, references, everything. You'd be amazed. The Sufi poets use the name of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. They talk about Soham Su, because these are Sufi practices which are quite similar to some yogic practices also. But now, I don't think any young Kashmiri in the valley will understand what Shah Kapoor is saying, or what sometimes Prakash Ram is saying, or what sometimes Wahab Khan is saying, these Sufi poets. So that is a sad thing.
Right. So, I want to also bring you back to the idea of feminism, and I feel that this book will be as much part of a comparative literature course as it should be of gender studies and feminist studies, because these four women are such powerful feminists, and how do they how have they helped in constructing this identity of the Kashmiri Pandit woman or Kashmiri woman? How do you see that?
You see, uh, unfortunately, I'm not analyzed really. I'm not a sociology student or anything. But the question is that you have influenced, but only as long as you read their works.
Right.
Otherwise, it's getting lost.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that this book of mine is being received very well by young people. And they are driven back to the original. They want to look at what the original was like. And several of them have decided to really do a thorough research on the work of these women. And this is something I think I should be grateful for. And I should think that this divine agency, which wanted to foreground these four women, is working in their favor. And more and more young Kashmiris are interested in their work.
Right.
But you see, they were not consciously feminists,
Right.
but their work is revealing.
Yeah.
And Lal Ded has no She's supposed to be an embodiment of patience and tolerance and everything, but she has no time for a fool.
Yeah.
In some of her talks, you will
I'm so
see
glad.
that she says that I could do this, I could work so many miracles, but I never knew the art to convince a fool. And
Which is
she,
so wonderful, you know.
actually, in one walk, she asked her guru, Hey Gora Parmeshwara, Bhavtam Seichi Antarvyud, Dashvai Vapdan Kandapura, Ha Kyajtut Hu Turun. Oh Guru, this people will not understand unless I explain a little.
Yeah.
Guru, you are supposed to know everything. But tell me, both the breaths emerge from the center of from the solar plexus. Why is ha hot and why is hu cold? And then, without waiting for the answer, she then supplies the answer herself without waiting for the guru. And she says that you see, the solar plexus region has the nature of heat, it is hot all the time. And the sahasra, the top of the brain, is cool. So the breath rises from this thing when it passes through this Kandapura, the solar plexus, it's hot. But when it descends in these cooling streams of this thing, it becomes cool. You see, this is a profound philosophical thought. But
Yeah.
she begins by telling the guru that you are supposed to know everything. Tell me. But and that other place also she says, Goras Prichom Sasilate. Prathan Lucis the Socis. त्रिचोम स्वंतम क्या था यत्न के नाव tat kya bana. I had asked the guru 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Kept asking, did he have wasted away without receiving an answer? That I gave, what do you call him who has no name? What name do you call him by that? And look at this wonderful thing, the he who has no name. That he's not compartmentalized as your God or his God or
Right.
her God.
Right.
He's there for everyone. So what do you call him? I was asking the guru, he never told me.
Oh,
Then she
wonderful.
says, finally from everything, something emerged.
Right.
That I did the answer, but without the help of the guru. So this is a powerful voice, which is not, actually intimidated, or which is not. And of course, you know the story of her going around unclothed.
Unclothed. Yeah, of course. That is the first thing one hears about Lal Ded. But that was also a metaphorical thing. It may not necessarily have happened. It was.
I, I don't agree with those apologists who feel a little ashamed on her behalf. I don't agree.
You feel that it must have happened.
There is this similar story of a Tamilian poet also. I don't know whether it's Akka Mahadevi or who.
Right, right.
Supposed to be have walked around naked.
Right.
So this nakedness in itself is kind of a statement.
Yeah.
That there is nothing to be ashamed of. You see, you can say this woman's body
is nothing.
which you are sometimes, you see, made to feel ashamed of, you're made to feel it high,
Yeah.
made to that you have to hide it.
Right.
She acknowledges it. She says, no matter what I'm looking at, I don't care tuppence
Right.
what you think. And there is a story where she told her father-in-law, when people complained to him that, look, this lady is doing this. So she asked him to look out of the window. So, can you see any men?
Any man. Yeah.
And this is the story of Mirabai also.
Yeah.
Tulsidas was supposed not to meet any women. So she went and wanted to meet him, and when she was told that he doesn't meet any woman. So he said that, is there any other man except for Lord Krishna? This is the confidence of these,
Yeah.
poets.
And then look what happened to us.
You didn't know how to cherish it.
Yeah.
We are
yeah.
it, but I feel sorry for the young women of today. You don't know what a liberal, free atmosphere we grew up in. The college we had, as I told you, we had access to the best knowledge possible. We used to have the best people visitors addressing our students. Will you believe it that in 1983 we invited Salman Rushdie to the college and he read
Wow.
pieces of his work?
Really?
Of course, before he had written the satanic verses.
Wow.
So there you are.
No, and also all your principal, you also became principal, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, I never administered the college.
Oh,
I was given the grade and status of a principal, but they thought that I was much better use as a head of
head
Department
of
of English.
department. But
Ah,
there was
I
there
had
was a there was a very famous principal, wasn't there, who was best friends with
my
Miss
principal,
Gandhi?
Mahmooda Ahmad Ali Shah, who
Yeah,
college, who was a remarkable woman. You can't imagine a lady born in 1919. How modern she was, how forward-looking she was, how determined she was that young women should become educated. And what she used to tell us in the college assembly when I went as a student,
hmm,
apna sar utha ke chalo.
right,
Don't stand like this.
right,
Lift your head up, and you can do anything.
right,
And she took us on tour, educational tours to the farthest corners of India.
right.
We were able to meet the great people, the presidents and others
Yeah,
who
I
were.
know. My mother, my aunts, they've all met presidents, prime ministers as part of the college
Yes,
team.
all used to come. And Jawaharlal Nehru used to come to the college. He would watch our little efforts at, drama also and enjoy them. Lal Bahadur Shastri, Indira Gandhi used to be like a president of the women's college.
Yeah,
It was
she would
very,
come quite often, I believe. She was very good friends with Dr.
yes, yes.
Mahmooda.
You
Yeah.
can imagine Hamuda ji was devoted to her. It was very great friendship they enjoyed. And Mahmooda ji had been a liberal free thinker even when she did her master's degree in Lahore, undivided Punjab. And she was associated with all these, liberal thinkers, free thinkers, the slightly leftist thinkers. And she carried that, thought and that philosophy with her right till the end. And to the college girls, she gave so much confidence.
Right.
She encouraged them so much. And I'll tell you something interesting now that you mention her. When I did my MA,
Hmm.
I passed my MA. There was no idea that I would work because at that time, Kashmiri Pandit women did not work. They were looked down upon. If somebody took up a job, it was infra-dig.
Right.
Anyway, I hadn't even thought about what I would do after passing my MA. My result had just come, and I was thinking that maybe I'll do some research or something. Mahmooda ji actually sent for me because I had been her student. She said,
Hmm.
"Your results have come out. What are you doing at home?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "Come, a lady, a professor is going on leave for 2 years. You come and teach in her place."
Wow.
Straight away, she gave me third year. Final year, the head of Department of English was also a wonderful lady, Sakina Hassan from Lucknow, she was. And then they entrusted me with this huge class. They had so much confidence in me. And then I came home and I told my father and mother, they laughed. They couldn't believe it. How can you go? What will you teach? You are so young yourself.
Yeah.
But then I borrowed my mother's thick khadar sari, wore it and took the classes, and that was it.
How wonderful, So much,
Yes,
what we call women's solidarity now, this was
yes,
ingrained.
how she would encourage everyone who had
Exactly.
potential. And I'll tell you something, another interesting thing about her. She sort of valued me as a teacher.
Hmm.
She was fond of me as a student, but as a teacher also, she somehow had a very good opinion of me. Sometimes I had to take leave because my husband used to be posted out of Srinagar many times. And then she said, what is happening? You are taking leave. I said, what can I do? My husband insists that I should come at least for these few months. Then will you believe it? Next day, the chief minister of the state had come to visit the college. And anyway, I was a young lecturer, so I was not anywhere near the principal's office. But suddenly a peon comes and he says, Mahmoodaji is calling you to her office.
Right.
So I didn't know what was happening. So when I went into her room, the chief minister Sadiq Saab was sitting there. she addresses him and says, "Sir, this is a very bright teacher we have, and her husband is being posted here and there. Please see that she doesn't have to take any more leave." That is what he said. I mean, imagine, just she had so much, so much interest in the college itself. It's not that she was personally anything, but she thought that I was doing good because we were doing plays and debates and seminars and inviting people and everything. Her life was the college,
Yeah.
and
I
other
think
people.
that's a biography waiting to be written. I wonder if someone has written it.
Mahmudachi's biography.
Huh.
I don't think anybody has really written.
But it
Should be.
really deserves to be written, don't you think?
You are the writers, Kaveri.
Yeah.
I'll help you research it and you write it.
I would love to do that because she has influenced so many women.
Oh, generations of women. She was one of a kind.
Yeah.
And she always used to wear a sari.
Yeah.
And at that time, people couldn't go wearing jewelry to the college. In
Right.
fact, her own niece once, she got married and she came to college next day, rather ostentatiously dressed. She made her go home. Says, "This is not the way." Sober,
Wonderful.
smart dress, but not clumsy, not shoddy, not riffraff. She appreciated people having a personality. She was great. I think she's influenced several generations of Kashmiri women, and they owe her so much, really.
Absolutely. I think they acknowledge it, but I think it needs to be recorded. Uh,
Recorded acknowledgement is not enough. It has to
yeah,
be recorded
exactly.
because soon, very soon, people will not even believe that such a person existed.
Exactly. They will not think that, there was someone who encouraged women, regardless of their religion, ethnicity,
Oh,
she didn't
absolutely
care.
nothing. Nothing about religion at
Yeah.
all. And I'll tell you, religion had nothing to do with it, but she had this desire to bring out women who were a bit backward in the sense, didn't have the best of environment to live in. She encouraged them to come out, educate themselves, study. I'll give you one example of one lady
Hmm,
who used to wear a burqa
hmm,
to college. But Mahmuda ji encouraged her to continue her studies. So
hmm.
she went to Aligarh, did her master's in Persian, I think. When she came back, she got this, Mahmudaji got her appointed as the lecturer in the college. And then she gave up the burqa, everything. And then this lady went on to become the principal of the college also
Wow.
later on, after Mahmudaji retired. And she also used to wear a sari then.
Right.
You may not believe, but as principal, she wore a sari because it was a kind of a uniform of dignity for
Right.
women who were in the institution
Right.
without protest, without anything.
I mean,
So you
one
get
can only feel so sad, when you hear these stories, and to a great extent, I suppose my generation has also, in a way, been denied. But I think it is our duty now to at least record it, chronicle it, and
reclaim,
keep it alive.
reclaim your heritage.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely take pride in who you are
Right.
and think that the sky is the limit for your achievements.
Right. I don't think there's a better way to end this conversation,
Well, thank
except
you very much.
except for me to endorse again a remarkable book that you've written, and I think which will start off several young women, I think, younger than me, I hope, on a journey to reclaim their Kashmir and the Kashmir of their mothers. I think
Take pride in what
exactly.
Kashmir is like, really.
So I
Thank you
think
very much,
you've
Tani.
done a remarkable thing, Neerja ji, and all the very best.
I'm humbled by these words. I
Thank
don't think I did it for pleasure. It's a labor of love. But if you appreciate it, I'm happy.
Thank you so much. This
Most
is to Lal Ded, to Habba Khatoon, Rupa Bhavani, and
and
Arnimal. May their spirit live on in all of us.
you know that this whole book is actually a product of women in every way.
Yes, by Urvashi, who's published it.
Urvashi Bhutaria, who published it, the four women whom I have mentioned in my acknowledgements, who pushed it and who made it possible, and the four women poets themselves.
Yeah.
No male intervention anywhere.
And Nilima Sheikh's cover.
Neerima Sheikh is herself such a wonderful
Right.
person.
Yeah.
I, it's just by chance she had sent me a catalogue of her paintings.
Right.
When I saw this one picture there, I thought that this is meant for my book. So I had the audacity to call her up, tell her whether we could use it. She was such a gracious lady. She said, it'll be my privilege.
Right.
Because she was also fond of Lal Ded and all.
Right.
She also done some work with Lalwar.
Yeah.
So, as I told you, this is the happy coincidences and happy chances, epiphanies, or you might call them whatever. But so you were mentioning Vinay Dimashik. Isn't that cover beautiful?
It's beautiful. Everything about the book is beautiful. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Neerja. Namaskar, and
Thank,
I hope you continue with your wonderful work. Thank you.
thank you. Very good.